In a small, dusty town in Texas where the sun blazed hot and the air carried the faint smell of cattle and dry grass, life moved at its own unhurried pace. The people here were simple, hard-working farmers, mechanics, shopkeepers, and retirees, who had spent decades calling this place home. Everyone knew everyone else's name, and most folks greeted each other with a nod or a wave as they passed on the cracked sidewalks. The heart of the town wasn't its church or school, but rather Joe's Bar, a weathered wooden building that stood proudly on Main Street. It was the kind of place where locals gathered after work to swap stories over cold beers, laugh about old memories, or simply sit quietly nursing their drinks while listening to the jukebox play classic country tunes. On this particular Friday evening, the bar was buzzing with its usual mix of patrons. Some were regulars like Frank, the mechanic who always wore grease-stained overalls, and Sally, the waitress whose sharp wit could cut through any awkward silence. Others were newcomers passing through town, eager for a break from the long highway stretches. Among them sat Walter, an 84-year-old man with deep wrinkles etched into his dark brown skin and hands that spoke volumes of hard labor and sacrifice. Walter was no stranger to Joe's Bar. He came here every Friday, always taking the same seat at the far corner near the window. He ordered the same drink, a whiskey sour, no ice. To most, he seemed like just another elderly man enjoying his routine, but those who truly knew him understood there was much more beneath the surface. Walter was a decorated Vietnam War veteran. He had served his country during some of the darkest days of the conflict, earning medals for bravery and leadership under fire. Yet, despite his accomplishments, Walter rarely talked about his time in the military. When asked, he'd simply smile softly and say, "That was another lifetime ago." His quiet demeanor made him easy to overlook. But if you looked closely, you could see the weight of history in his eyes, the kind of wisdom that only comes from surviving unimaginable hardships. Tonight, however, Walter wasn't thinking about the past. He was focused on the present moment, sipping his drink slowly and watching the world go by outside the window. The peace of the evening was shattered when the door to the bar swung open with a loud creak. A group of bikers walked in, their heavy boots thudding against the wooden floorboards. There were 6 of them, all dressed in black leather jackets adorned with patches and insignias that marked them as members of a notorious motorcycle club. Their arrival drew immediate attention. Conversations paused mid-sentence and heads turned to watch as they swaggered toward the counter. These men weren't locals. They were outsiders, and their presence brought an unmistakable tension to the room. They laughed loudly, slapping each other on the back and ordering rounds of shots without regard for anyone else around them. Their leader, a towering man with a thick beard and tattoos snaking up both arms, scanned the room with a sneer. His gaze landed on Walter almost immediately. Something about the old man sitting alone in the corner seemed to irritate him. Maybe it was the way Walter carried himself, calm and dignified, or maybe it was just the fact that he didn't flinch when the biker locked eyes with him. Whatever the reason, the biker decided to make an example out of Walter. Striding over to the corner table, he planted himself directly in front of the veteran. "What's this?" he growled, pointing at Walter. "Some old geezer hogging space. In our bar?" Walter didn't respond. He didn't need to. His silence said enough. But the biker wasn't satisfied. With a cruel smirk, he reached out and shoved Walter off his stool. The sudden force sent Walter stumbling backward, his frail body crashing against the wall behind him. Glasses clinked, and chairs scraped against the floor as people instinctively leaned away from the commotion. For a brief moment, the entire bar froze in stunned silence. No one dared move or speak. Walter steadied himself, brushing off imaginary dust from his shirt. His expression remained calm, almost indifferent, though his knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of the table. He didn't retaliate, didn't raise his voice. Instead, he straightened his posture and met the biker's glare head-on, his eyes filled with a quiet strength that unnerved even the bully. The biker laughed, clearly enjoying the reaction, or lack thereof, from his victim. "Not so tough now, are you, Grandpa?" he jeered, turning back to his friends who hooted and hollered in approval. The rest of the bikers joined in, their laughter echoing through the tense atmosphere like thunderclouds. Gathering before a storm, Walter returned to his seat, ignoring the taunts as best he could. Around him, the other patrons exchanged uneasy glances. Some muttered under their breath, expressing sympathy for Walter, but too afraid to intervene. Others looked away altogether, unwilling to draw attention to themselves. The mood in the bar had shifted dramatically, from relaxed camaraderie to palpable fear. Yet amidst the chaos, one thing became clear. Walter may have been outnumbered and physically weaker, but his spirit remained unbroken, and little did anyone know this act of cruelty would soon set off a chain of events that none of them could have anticipated. Outside the bar, parked a short distance away, sat a modest sedan. Inside was Mia, Walter's granddaughter, waiting patiently for her grandfather to finish his drink. She often accompanied him to the bar, not because she enjoyed the atmosphere, but because she worried about him driving home alone after having a few drinks. Mia loved her grandfather deeply. Growing up, he had been her rock, a steady source of guidance and support when life felt overwhelming. Hearing his stories about growing up in a segregated America and later serving in the military had taught her resilience and gratitude. So when she saw what happened inside the bar through the window, anger surged within her like wildfire. Mia watched as the biker shoved Walter, her heart pounding with outrage. Her first instinct was to rush inside and confront the man herself, but she quickly realized that wouldn't solve anything. It might even make things worse. Instead, she pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed out a message. The recipient wasn't the local police, whom she doubted would arrive fast enough to make a difference, nor was it a friend or family member who lived nearby. It was someone far more powerful and personal. Her uncle, Marcus, was Walter's son and her father's younger brother. Unlike Walter, who preferred a quiet life away from the spotlight, Marcus had followed in his father's footsteps by joining the military. Over the years, he had risen through the ranks to become a high-ranking officer commanding a Black Hawk unit stationed less than an hour away. Though Marcus had a reputation for being stern and disciplined, he adored his father and would do anything to protect him. Knowing this, Mia sent a single text. "Grandpa got shoved by some bikers at Joe's bar. Please help." The reply came almost instantly. "On our way." As Mia waited, gripping the steering wheel tightly, she couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Part of her worried about what Marcus might do. After all, his position gave him access to resources most people could only dream of. Another part of her felt a flicker of hope. If anyone could teach those bullies a lesson, it was Marcus. Still, the uncertainty gnawed at her. Would they really come? And if they did, how far would they go? Back inside the bar, the tension lingered like a bad smell. The bikers continued their rowdy behavior, oblivious to the storm brewing just beyond the horizon. Patrons whispered nervously among themselves, casting wary glances at Walter, who remained seated at his corner table. Some offered sympathetic smiles while others avoided eye contact altogether. The bartender refilled glasses mechanically, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy despite the chaos. Outside, the sky grew darker, and the stars began to peek through the clouds. Everything seemed eerily calm, too calm. Then suddenly, the unmistakable sound of helicopter blades slicing through the night air shattered the stillness. At first, no one paid much attention. Helicopters weren't uncommon in rural areas, especially near military bases. People assumed it was either a medical emergency or perhaps a routine training exercise. But as the noise grew louder and closer, curiosity turned to alarm. Heads turned toward the windows and gasps rippled through the crowd as a massive Black Hawk helicopter descended onto the field adjacent to the bar. Its rotors whipped up clouds of dust, sending debris flying in every direction. Spotlights illuminated the area, casting eerie shadows on the ground below. Soldiers clad in full gear poured out of the helicopter, moving with precision and purpose. Their movements were synchronized, practiced to perfection. Rifles slung across their shoulders, they formed a tight formation and marched toward the bar. Onlookers gathered outside, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. Phones were pulled out, cameras clicked, and murmurs spread like wildfire. What on earth was happening? Why were armed soldiers descending upon their sleepy little town? Inside the bar, the scene was equally surreal. Conversations halted as the roar of the helicopter drowned out all other sounds. The bikers, who had been laughing moments earlier, now looked visibly uneasy. Their bravado faltered as they exchanged anxious glances. Even the bartender stopped mid-pour, his jaw dropping as realization dawned. This wasn't just some random landing, it was deliberate. The moment the Black Hawk helicopter touched down outside Joe's bar, the entire town seemed to hold its breath. The deafening roar of the rotors drowned out all other sounds, and the bright spotlights from the chopper illuminated the field like daylight. People spilled out of their homes, cars, and nearby shops, drawn by the spectacle unfolding before their eyes. Some stood frozen in shock, while others scrambled to grab their phones, desperate to capture the scene on camera. For a small, sleepy town where nothing exciting ever happened, this was beyond anything anyone could have imagined. As the soldiers disembarked from the helicopter, their boots hit the ground with precision and authority. Each step they took radiated discipline and purpose, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing inside the bar. Clad in full combat gear, helmets, tactical vests, and rifles slung across their shoulders, they moved as one cohesive unit. Their faces were obscured by sunglasses and masks, adding an air of mystery and intimidation. Onlookers whispered among themselves, speculating wildly about what was going on. Was there a national emergency? A hostage situation? Or had something far more personal brought these armed forces to their doorstep? Marcus, Walter's son and the commanding officer of the unit, led the charge. Standing tall and broad-shouldered, he exuded confidence and control. His presence alone commanded respect, but it was clear that tonight, his mission was deeply personal. As he strode toward the bar, flanked by his team, Marcus's jaw was set in determination. His mind replayed Mia's urgent text over and over again. "Grandpa got shoved by some bikers at Joe's bar, please help." Those few words had ignited a fire within him, a mix of anger, protectiveness, and a fierce desire to defend the man who had sacrificed so much for his family and country. Tonight wasn't just about teaching some bullies a lesson. It was about honoring Walter's legacy and ensuring justice was served. Inside the bar, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The bikers, who had been laughing and boasting just moments earlier, now looked uneasy. Their swagger had evaporated, replaced by nervous glances and fidgeting hands. They weren't used to being on the receiving end of fear. Their usual bravado relied on intimidating others, not facing consequences. Now, trapped inside a room filled with frightened patrons and the growing rumble of military activity outside, they began to realize they were in way over their heads. One of them muttered, under his breath, "What the hell is going on?" Another shrugged, trying to mask his panic with indifference, but deep down they all knew this wasn't going to end well. For the rest of the bar's patrons, confusion reigned supreme. Some huddled together near the windows, peering out cautiously at the soldiers assembling outside. Others stayed rooted, to their seats too stunned to move. Conversations buzzed quietly around the room. "Do you think it's terrorists?" "No, I heard someone called them here." "Who calls the army to a bar fight?" Everyone speculated, but no one dared speak loudly enough to draw attention. The only person who remained completely unfazed was Walter. He sat calmly in his corner, sipping the last remnants of his whiskey sour. Though his expression betrayed nothing, his mind raced with questions. Had Marcus really come for him? And if so, how far would his son go to make things right? When the soldiers finally entered the bar, the impact was immediate and overwhelming. The heavy wooden door swung open with a bang, and the entire room fell silent. Every head turned to watch as Marcus stepped inside, followed by several of his men. Their boots thudded against the floorboards, each step echoing like thunder in the suddenly quiet space. Marcus removed his sunglasses, revealing sharp, focused eyes that scanned the room methodically. When his gaze landed on Walter, he allowed himself a brief smile before turning his attention to the crowd. "Everyone stay calm," Marcus announced, his voice firm yet controlled. It carried an authority that demanded obedience. "We're here to address a specific situation, and we mean no harm to anyone else." His words did little to ease the palpable fear in the room, but they succeeded in keeping everyone in place. The bikers exchanged panicked looks, realizing they were the obvious targets. One of them tried to stand up, perhaps hoping to slip away unnoticed, but Marcus's next command stopped him in his tracks. "Sit down," he barked, pointing directly at the group. "You're not going anywhere." With the bikers effectively immobilized, Marcus approached Walter. He knelt beside his father, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "Dad?" he said softly, his tone laced with both concern and admiration. "Are you okay?" Walter nodded slowly, his lips curling into a faint smile. "I'm fine, son," he replied, his voice steady despite the whirlwind surrounding them. "But I didn't ask for this." Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. "I know you didn't. That's why I'm here, to remind people what respect looks like." Turning back to face the crowd, Marcus addressed everyone once more. "This man," he declared, gesturing toward Walter, "is a hero. He fought for your freedom, bled for your safety, and spent decades serving his country. Yet tonight he was treated with disrespect and violence, all because someone thought they could push him around." His words hung heavy in the air, resonating with everyone present. Even those who didn't know Walter personally felt a pang of guilt and shame. How could anyone treat a veteran, a symbol of sacrifice and courage, with such cruelty? The bikers squirmed uncomfortably under Marcus's piercing gaze. Their leader, the same burly man who had shoved Walter earlier, attempted to protest. "Hey man, it was just a joke," he stammered, raising his hands defensively. "We didn't mean anything by it." Marcus cut him off with a glare that could freeze fire. "A joke?" he repeated, his voice dangerously low. "You call assaulting an 84-year-old war veteran a joke? Do you even understand the weight of what you've done?" The biker opened his mouth to respond, but quickly closed it when Marcus signaled for his men to step forward. Two soldiers moved, swiftly, cuffing the bikers' wrists behind their backs and reading them their rights. The process was efficient and professional, leaving no room for argument or resistance. As the bikers were led outside, protests and excuses spilled from their mouths, but none of it mattered. Marcus ignored their pleas, focusing instead on ensuring Walter received the recognition and respect he deserved. Turning back to the crowd, he raised his voice slightly. "Let this be a reminder to all of you," he said. "Respect isn't given, it's earned, and my father has earned it 10 times over." Outside, the scene was equally dramatic. The bikers were loaded onto a waiting military vehicle, their leather jackets and tough guy personas rendered meaningless in the face of true authority. Spectators gathered around, snapping photos and recording videos as the soldiers worked. Some cheered quietly, clearly pleased to see justice being served. Others simply stared in awe, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what had just transpired. The Black Hawk helicopter still loomed overhead, its rotors spinning lazily as if daring anyone to challenge its presence. Back inside the bar, the mood had shifted dramatically. What had started as a tense and chaotic evening had transformed into something almost celebratory. Patrons clapped and whistled, showing their support for Walter and applauding Marcus's decisive actions. Walter, however, remained humble. He waved off the praise, insisting he hadn't done anything special. "I just wanted to enjoy my drink in peace," he joked, eliciting laughter from the crowd. Despite his modesty, it was impossible to ignore the pride swelling in the room. For the first time in years, Walter felt truly seen, not as an old man fading into obscurity, but as the hero he had always been. As the night wore on, Marcus joined his father at the corner table, pulling up a chair to sit beside him. Together, they shared quiet moments, exchanging stories and reflections. Walter marveled at how much his son had grown into a leader, while Marcus expressed gratitude for the lessons his father had instilled in him. Outside, the helicopters eventually powered down, and the soldiers prepared to leave. But the memory of that night would linger long after they were gone, a testament to the power of family, loyalty, and standing up for what's right. By morning, News of the incident had spread far beyond the borders of the small Texas town. Social media platforms lit up with posts and videos capturing the dramatic arrival of the Black Hawk unit and the subsequent arrest of the bikers. Headlines blared across local and national outlets. Veteran assaulted by bikers, rescued by military. Unit. Son commands helicopter landing to defend father. And justice served in small-town Texas. The story struck a chord with millions, sparking conversations about the treatment of veterans and the importance of respecting elders. Messages of support poured in from strangers across the country, thanking Walter for his service and praising Marcus for his leadership. For Walter, the aftermath of that night brought unexpected changes. Invitations to speak at community events flooded in, and schools requested his presence to share stories of his wartime experiences with younger generations. At first he hesitated, reluctant to step into the spotlight. But with encouragement from Marcus and Mia, he embraced the opportunity to inspire others. His speeches became a blend of history, humor, and heartfelt advice, reminding audiences of the values that had guided him through life: resilience, humility, and unwavering dedication to doing what's right. The morning after the dramatic events at Joe's bar dawned bright and clear, as if the sky itself wanted to celebrate the triumph of justice. News of the incident spread like wildfire, fueled by social media posts, viral videos, and local news coverage. By breakfast time, Walter had become a household name, not just in his small Texas town but across the country. Footage of the Black Hawk helicopter landing outside the bar, soldiers marching with precision, and Marcus confronting the bikers dominated every major news outlet. The story was irresistible. An 84-year-old war veteran disrespected by rowdy bikers, only for his son, a high-ranking Army officer, to swoop in with military might and restore honor. For Walter, waking up that day felt surreal. He hadn't asked for any of this attention. In fact, he preferred staying out of the spotlight, content to live quietly and let his actions speak for themselves. But now, there was no escaping it. Phones rang off the hook at his modest home, reporters camped outside his front door, and neighbors stopped by unannounced to offer congratulations or simply gawk at the man who had unknowingly become a national hero. Walter handled it all with grace, though he couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. "I just wanted to drink my whiskey sour in peace," he joked during one brief interview, shaking his head in disbelief. Marcus, too, found himself thrust into the limelight. His decision to deploy a Black Hawk unit to defend his father was met with both admiration and criticism. Some praised him for his boldness and leadership, calling him a modern-day defender of justice. Others questioned whether such a show of force was necessary, arguing that the situation could have been handled by local law enforcement. Despite the mixed reactions, Marcus remained steadfast in his belief that drastic measures were warranted. "When someone disrespects a veteran, especially my father, it's not just an insult to him. It's an insult to everything we stand for as a nation," he told reporters during a press conference. "I'd do it again in a heartbeat." Mia, meanwhile, became something of a local celebrity herself. Her quick thinking and resourcefulness had set the entire chain of events in motion, earning her praise from everyone she encountered. Friends and acquaintances marveled at her courage, while strangers online hailed her as a role model for standing up against injustice. For Mia, the sudden fame was overwhelming but also deeply gratifying. She never imagined that sending a single text message would spark such a monumental response. Yet, as she reflected on the events of the previous night, she realized how important it was to act when faced with wrongdoing. If you see something wrong, say something, or call someone who can fix it, she quipped during an impromptu chat with a reporter. Her words resonated widely, becoming a rallying cry for bystanders everywhere. As the days passed, the story continued to evolve, touching lives far beyond the borders of the small Texas town. Veterans groups across the country seized on the incident as a teachable moment, using it to highlight the challenges faced by aging service members. Many veterans shared their own stories of feeling overlooked or mistreated, echoing Walter's quiet dignity and resilience. Social media campaigns. sprang up encouraging people to thank veterans in their communities and advocate for better support systems. Hashtags like Respect Our Heroes and Stand With Walter trended nationwide, drawing millions of interactions and sparking heartfelt discussions about gratitude and accountability. In the midst of this whirlwind, Walter's life began to change in unexpected ways. Invitations poured in from organizations eager to honor him. Schools invited him to speak to students about his experiences in Vietnam, hoping to bridge the generational gap and instill values of perseverance and sacrifice. Community centers organized special events where Walter could share his stories and connect with younger generations. At first he hesitated, unsure if he was the right person for such a role, but Marcus and Mia encouraged him, reminding him of the impact his words could have. Slowly, Walter embraced his newfound platform, delivering speeches that blended humor, humility, and hard-earned wisdom. "Life is about more than medals and accolades," he often said. "It's about doing what's right, even when no one is watching." His talk struck a chord with audiences of all ages. Children listened wide-eyed as he described jungle patrols and close calls, while adults nodded thoughtfully at his reflections on camaraderie and loss. One particularly memorable moment came during a visit to a middle school, where a young boy shyly approached Walter after his presentation. "Thank you for your service," the boy said, handing over a handmade card decorated with stars and stripes. Walter's eyes welled with tears as he accepted the gesture, realizing that his story had touched hearts in ways he never anticipated. Meanwhile, the bikers faced mounting consequences for their actions. Their arrest made headlines, painting them as villains in a real-life drama. Legal proceedings dragged on for weeks with charges ranging from assault to disorderly conduct. Public opinion largely sided against them, with many viewing their behavior as symptomatic of a broader lack of respect for authority and tradition. The court case drew significant attention, with spectators packing the courtroom to witness the outcome. Ultimately, the judge handed down stiff penalties, including hefty fines and community service mandates. While some argued that the punishment fit the crime, others believed the bikers' public shaming was penalty enough. Regardless, their reputations were irrevocably tarnished, serving as a cautionary tale about the dangers of arrogance and entitlement. Back in the town where it all began, life slowly returned to normal, but with a noticeable shift. Joe's Bar, once a sleepy watering hole, became a symbol of unity and resilience. Patrons spoke proudly of the night the Black Hawk landed, recounting details to newcomers with a mix of awe and pride. The owner, Joe himself, hung a framed photo of Walter alongside Marcus near the entrance, captioned "True Heroes." It served as a reminder of the extraordinary events that had unfolded within those walls and the lessons they carried forward. For Walter, the experience marked a turning point. He had spent decades keeping his wartime achievements private, believing that his sacrifices were part of a collective effort rather than individual glory. Now, however, he understood the importance of sharing his story, not for personal recognition, but to inspire others. He began volunteering at veteran outreach programs, mentoring younger ex-servicemen struggling to adjust to civilian life. His presence brought comfort and hope, proving that even in old age one's contributions remain invaluable. Marcus, too, found renewed purpose in the aftermath of the incident. Though he had always been proud of his military career, this episode reinforced the deeper meaning behind his work. Protecting his family wasn't just a personal mission, it represented a broader commitment to safeguarding the values America stood for. He started giving motivational speeches at military academies and community gatherings, urging young recruits to uphold the principles of honor, loyalty, and justice. His bond with Walter grew stronger than ever, forged through shared adversity and mutual respect. And then there was Mia, whose role in the saga earned her lasting admiration. Inspired by the events of that night, she decided to pursue a career in advocacy, focusing on issues affecting marginalized communities. She credited her grandfather for teaching her the importance of standing up for what's right, no matter the odds. "Grandpa taught me that courage isn't about being fearless," she wrote in a heartfelt essay published in a national magazine. "It's about acting despite fear, because you know it's the right thing to do." By the time autumn rolled around, the town held a special ceremony to formally recognize Walter and thank Marcus and his unit for their intervention. Hundreds attended, including military personnel, local officials, and residents from neighboring communities. Walter received a plaque engraved with the words, "True American Hero," accompanied by a standing ovation that brought tears to his eyes. As he looked out at the sea of faces, he realized something profound. Sometimes life throws us curveballs, not to break us, but to remind us of our worth. That fateful night at the bar wasn't just about revenge or redemption. It was about reclaiming respect and reminding the world that heroes walk among us, often unnoticed until they're needed most. The legacy of that evening lived on long after the dust settled. It inspired countless individuals to reflect on the values of honor, loyalty, and justice. It proved that even in the darkest moments, light can shine through, and sometimes that light arrives aboard a Black Hawk helicopter. The weeks following the dramatic events at Joe's bar brought a wave of change that rippled far beyond the small Texas town. Walter's story had captured the hearts of millions, and his quiet dignity in the face of adversity resonated deeply with people from all walks of life. What started as an isolated incident quickly evolved into a national conversation about respect, justice, and the sacrifices made by veterans. For Walter, Marcus, Mia, and even the townsfolk who witnessed it all unfold, life would never be the same again. As autumn settled over the region, painting the landscape in hues of gold and crimson, the town prepared for a special ceremony to honor Walter and thank Marcus and his unit for their intervention. Flyers were posted on bulletin boards, announcements blared over local radio stations, and social media buzzed with anticipation. The event was set to take place in the town square, wide open space framed by towering oak trees and lined with picnic tables. It was here that hundreds gathered one crisp Saturday morning, eager to celebrate the man whose resilience had inspired them all. The atmosphere was electric. Families arrived early, setting up folding chairs and blankets to secure good spots. Children ran around playing tag while vendors sold hot dogs, popcorn, and homemade pies. A stage had been erected at the center of the square, adorned with American flags fluttering gently in the breeze. Behind the stage stood a podium flanked by 2 rows of soldiers in full dress uniform, their presence lending gravitas to the occasion. Among them was Marcus, standing tall and proud, his eyes scanning the crowd for familiar faces. When Walter finally appeared, escorted by Mia and several close friends, the crowd erupted into applause. He walked slowly but steadily, leaning slightly on a cane yet refusing any additional assistance. Dressed in a neatly pressed suit with medals pinned to his chest, he looked every bit the hero he was being celebrated as. As he approached the stage, people rose to their feet, cheering and whistling. Walter waved modestly, clearly uncomfortable with the attention but touched by the outpouring of love and gratitude. Once everyone was seated, the ceremony began. Local officials delivered speeches, praising Walter's courage and emphasizing the importance of honoring veterans. Then came testimonials from community members who shared how Walter's story had impacted their lives. One woman recounted how she had taken her children to visit a nearby veterans' home after hearing about the incident, sparking meaningful conversations about sacrifice and duty. Another man spoke about rekindling his relationship with his grandfather, a World War II veteran whom he had neglected for years. Each story underscored the profound effect Walter's actions, and Marcus's response, had on those around them. Finally, it was Marcus's turn to speak. Stepping up to the podium, he adjusted the microphone and took a deep breath before addressing the crowd. "Today isn't just about my father," he began, his voice steady and clear. "It's about every man and woman who has served this country, often without fanfare or recognition. They've given us freedoms we sometimes take for granted, and they deserve our respect, not because of what they've done, but because of who they are." His words struck a chord, drawing murmurs of agreement from the audience. He went on to describe the night of the bar incident, recounting how he received Mia's urgent text and immediately mobilized his team. "I didn't hesitate," Marcus said, his tone firm, "because when someone disrespects a veteran, they're not just targeting an individual. They're dishonoring everything we stand for as Americans, My father taught me that respect is earned, not demanded. But once earned, it must be defended. The crowd erupted into cheers, many rising to their feet once more. After Marcus finished speaking, Walter himself was invited to say a few words. Reluctantly, he stepped up to the podium, gripping its edges tightly. For a moment, he simply gazed out at the sea of faces, his expression thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a warmth and wisdom that silenced the crowd instantly. "I never sought fame or glory," he began, pausing to collect his thoughts. "All I ever wanted was to live quietly, do my part, and leave this world a little better than I found it." That night at the bar, well, I didn't think much of it. To me, it was just another challenge to endure. But now I see that it meant something bigger. He paused again, letting his words sink in. "What happened here reminds me of something important. We're stronger together. Whether it's family, neighbors, or strangers coming together, there's power in unity. And if sharing my story helps remind folks of that, then maybe all this attention wasn't such a bad thing after all." With that, Walter stepped back from the podium, eliciting another round of thunderous applause. Following the speeches, the ceremony transitioned into a more celebratory tone. A military band played patriotic tunes, filling the air with stirring melodies. Children presented Walter with handmade cards and drawings, each one brimming with admiration and gratitude. Nearby, a group of teenagers performed a choreographed dance routine dedicated to veterans, their movements synchronized and heartfelt. Throughout it all, Walter remained humble, accepting the accolades with a smile and occasional tears glistening in his eyes. Meanwhile, Marcus mingled with attendees, shaking hands and posing for photos. People thanked him profusely for his leadership and bravery, though he deflected much of the praise onto his team. "This wasn't just me," he insisted repeatedly. "It was a collective effort. We stand together. That's what makes us strong." His humility only endeared him further to the crowd, reinforcing the values he had spoken about earlier. Mia, too, basked in the glow of appreciation. Friends and acquaintances approached her throughout the day, expressing admiration for her quick thinking and resourcefulness. One elderly woman clasped Mia's hands tightly, saying, "You remind me of myself when I was your age, brave and bold. Keep fighting for what's right, dear." Moments like these filled Mia with pride, solidifying her decision to pursue advocacy work focused on marginalized communities. She realized that standing up for her grandfather had ignited a passion within her, a desire to amplify voices that might otherwise go unheard. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the square, the festivities wound down. People lingered, reluctant to let the day end. Many approached Walter one last time to shake his hand or share a final word of thanks. Others stayed behind to clean up, working together seamlessly in a testament to the spirit of camaraderie that had defined the event. For Walter, the ceremony marked the culmination of an incredible journey, one that had transformed him from a quiet, unassuming veteran into a symbol of hope and resilience. Yet despite the accolades and newfound fame, he remained grounded, focusing on the lessons he hoped others would take away. "Respect isn't about grand gestures or loud declarations," he told a reporter covering the event. "It's about treating people kindly, listening to their stories, and remembering that everyone has value." Marcus echoed this sentiment during a private conversation with his father later that evening. Sitting side by side on Walter's porch, sipping coffee as fireflies danced in the twilight, they reflected on the past few months. "Do you think things will go back to normal?" Walter asked, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Marcus chuckled, softly. "Probably not," he admitted, "but maybe that's okay. Sometimes normal needs a little shaking up." Indeed, the ripple effects of that fateful night continued to spread. Veterans groups across the country adopted Walter's story as a rallying cry, using it to advocate for improved support systems and greater public awareness. Schools incorporated his experiences into history lessons, ensuring future generations understood the sacrifices made by those who came before them. Even Hollywood took notice, with producers expressing interest in turning the tale into a feature film, a prospect Walter greeted with amused skepticism. In the town itself, the legacy of the Black Hawk Landing endured. Joe's Bar became a pilgrimage site of sorts, attracting visitors eager to glimpse the place where history had been made. Joe installed a plaque commemorating the event, alongside photos of Walter and Marcus, cementing its status as a landmark. Regulars joked that the bar had become too fancy for its own good, but secretly, they were proud of its newfound significance. For Mia, the experience reinforced her belief in the power of action. Inspired by her grandfather's example, she threw herself into volunteer work, organizing fundraisers for veterans' charities and mentoring young activists. Her efforts caught the eye of a prominent nonprofit organization, which offered her a position as a community outreach coordinator. Though daunting, the opportunity thrilled her, promising a chance to make a tangible difference in the world. And so, as winter approached and the days grew shorter, life in the small Texas town returned to its usual rhythm, but with a renewed sense of purpose. Walter resumed his Friday visits to Joe's Bar, now greeted with warm smiles and respectful nods wherever he went. Marcus continued his military career, carrying the lessons of that night with him wherever he was deployed. And Mia embarked on her new path, driven by the knowledge that even the smallest acts of courage could spark monumental change. Looking back, none of them could have predicted how one seemingly ordinary evening would spiral into something extraordinary. Months after the whirlwind of events surrounding Walter's story began, life in the small Texas town settled into a new rhythm. The initial frenzy of media attention and public adoration had subsided, leaving behind a quieter but equally profound legacy. For Walter, Marcus, Mia, and the townsfolk who had witnessed it all unfold, the experience continued to shape their lives in ways they could never have anticipated. Winter arrived, blanketing the landscape with frost and lending the town a serene stillness. Yet beneath this calm exterior, the spirit of resilience and unity that had emerged from the bar incident burned brighter than ever. Walter, now accustomed to his role as an honorary figure, found himself embraced by a community eager to learn from his wisdom. Schools invited him regularly to speak at assemblies, where he shared stories of sacrifice, perseverance, and camaraderie. His talks weren't flashy or overly dramatic. He didn't need theatrics to capture attention. Instead, he spoke plainly, weaving humor and humility into tales of jungle patrols and midnight missions. Students listened intently, hanging on every word, while teachers marveled at how effortlessly Walter connected across generations. One particularly memorable visit occurred at a high school history class. After recounting a harrowing escape during the Vietnam War, Walter paused and looked directly at the students. "Courage isn't about being fearless," he said, leaning forward slightly. "It's about doing what needs to be done even when you're scared out of your mind." A teenage boy raised his hand hesitantly. "What if we mess up?" he asked. Walter smiled gently. "Then you try again. Failure doesn't define you. It's how you respond that matters." The room erupted into applause, and the teacher later remarked that it was one of the most impactful lessons her students had ever experienced. Marcus, too, carried the lessons of that fateful night into his professional life. Stationed back at his base, he became a vocal advocate for veteran support programs within the military. He spearheaded initiatives aimed at addressing mental health challenges faced by service members and ensuring smoother transitions to civilian life. During motivational speeches at training camps, Marcus emphasized the importance of protecting not just national borders, but also the values that define them. "We fight for freedom, justice, and respect," he told cadets during one address. "And those principles don't end when we take off our uniforms. They guide us in everything we do." His bond with Walter deepened further through these efforts. The two spent hours discussing strategies to improve conditions for veterans, often sitting together on Walter's porch late into the evening. Their conversations were filled with laughter, nostalgia, and occasional debates over policy details. To Marcus, these moments were priceless, not only because they strengthened their father-son relationship, but also because they reminded him why he chose a life of service. Walter, for his part, took immense pride in seeing Marcus channel his leadership skills toward meaningful change. "You've grown into a fine man," he told Marcus one night, clapping him affectionately on the shoulder. "I couldn't be prouder." Mia, meanwhile, thrived in her new role as a community outreach coordinator. Her position allowed her to combine her passion for advocacy with practical action, organizing fundraisers, workshops, and mentorship programs for marginalized groups. Inspired by her grandfather's example, she focused heavily on bridging generational gaps, encouraging young people to engage with elders and learn from their experiences. One initiative, called Legacy Letters, invited students to interview senior citizens in their communities and write essays based on their stories. The project gained widespread acclaim, earning Mia recognition from local newspapers and nonprofit organizations alike. But perhaps the most rewarding aspect of Mia's work was the personal connections she forged along the way. She befriended countless veterans, listening to their struggles and triumphs with genuine empathy. Many confided in her about challenges they faced reintegrating into society, feelings of isolation, difficulty finding employment, or navigating healthcare systems. Mia worked tirelessly to connect them with resources and support networks, determined to ensure no one felt forgotten. "Grandpa taught me that everyone has value," she explained during a TEDx talk. "It's up to us to see it and honor it." Back in the town itself, the ripple effects of Walter's story continued to inspire acts of kindness and solidarity. Neighbors checked in on each other more frequently, offering help without hesitation. Joe's Bar remained a hub of activity, hosting charity events and fundraisers for causes ranging from veterans' aid to scholarship programs. Even the Bikers Clubhouse, once a source of tension, underwent a surprising transformation. Several members distanced themselves from the group following the arrests, citing disillusionment with its culture of aggression and disrespect. Some even joined volunteer efforts around town, seeking redemption and a chance to rebuild trust. The town council, motivated by the nationwide spotlight the incident had brought, launched a campaign to make the area more inclusive and welcoming. They introduced new policies supporting affordable housing, expanded access to healthcare services, and created recreational spaces designed to foster intergenerational interaction. At the heart of these initiatives lay a simple yet powerful message: respect begins at home. By nurturing a sense of belonging and mutual care, the town hoped to prevent similar incidents from occurring in the future. As spring returned, painting the fields green and filling the air with birdsong, the community gathered once more to celebrate Walter's enduring impact. This time the event wasn't formal or organized, but rather spontaneous, a testament to the organic bonds that had formed over the past year. Families picnicked under the shade of oak trees, musicians played acoustic sets, and children ran barefoot through sprinklers. Walter sat at the center of it all, surrounded by loved ones and well-wishers, his face glowing with contentment. During a light-hearted moment, someone jokingly referred to him as the Black Hawk veteran. The nickname stuck, becoming a playful nod to the extraordinary circumstances that had elevated him to hero status. Walter laughed good-naturedly, though privately he viewed it as a reminder of something greater than himself. "That helicopter didn't land for me," he told a reporter covering the gathering. "It landed for everyone who believes in standing up for what's right. I'm just glad I got to play a small part in it." Indeed, Walter's story transcended individual accolades. It served as a catalyst for reflection and growth, prompting countless individuals to reevaluate their priorities and embrace values like compassion, integrity, and courage. From classrooms to corporate boardrooms, discussions about respect and justice gained renewed urgency, fueled by the memory of an 84-year-old man who refused to back down, and the son who stood beside him. For Marcus, the journey reinforced his belief in the interconnectedness of humanity. Whether leading soldiers into battle or defending family against injustice, the underlying principle remained the same: protect what matters most. And for Mia, the experience illuminated the transformative power of action. By stepping forward, even when uncertain, she had sparked a chain reaction of positivity that touched lives far beyond her imagination. As the day drew to a close, Walter gazed out at the crowd one final time. Fireflies blinked lazily in the twilight, casting a soft glow over smiling faces and animated conversations. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the love and admiration showered upon him, but for the opportunity to witness such unity and purpose. Life, he realized, was full of unpredictable twists and turns, but amidst the chaos there existed moments of clarity, reminders of what truly mattered. Respect isn't given lightly, Walter murmured to himself, echoing words Marcus had spoken months earlier. It's earned and cherished. With that thought, he leaned back in his chair, letting the cool breeze carry away any lingering doubts. Whatever came next, he knew he'd face it with the same quiet strength that had carried him through decades of trials and triumphs. In the end, Walter's story wasn't just about a biker shoving an elderly veteran or a Black Hawk unit landing outside a bar. It was about reclaiming dignity, fostering connection, and reminding the world that heroes aren't defined by grand gestures, but by the everyday choices they make. It was proof that even in the darkest moments, light can shine through, and sometimes that light arrives aboard a helicopter named Hope,